An estimated 30,000, 40,000 young people graduate from tertiary institutions and also other public institutions of learning. And they do this with the hope that they can go to the job market and find a job therein, find a means of sustaining their livelihoods. Well, this has not been the case, as we have read from the Uganda Bureau of Statistics report of last year that unemployment continues to grow in Uganda at a rate of 4.2%. Well, what does this predicament, what does this dilemma mean for the young people? Is it about us exploring the need to expand the private sector? Is it about the quality of education? Is it about, the levels of the disparity in the skill set versus what is required in the labor market? Those questions shall be answered this afternoon on the Youth Roundtable. Well, secondly, inevitably, we know that the UPDF has come of 43 years of age this week, and, the celebrations were underway of Tarehe Sita. Well, from what people would refer to as a guerrilla or a rogue group of individuals to now a professional military, defense force. What does this mean for the country moving forward? Viewers, welcome to this episode of the Youth Roundtable. I'm joined by a panel of distinguished gentlemen to discuss with me this topic, and I shall introduce them to you, and in just no particular order. Next to myself is a gentleman who has served on the Uganda National Students Association executive. He currently serves on the Youth Council of Kisoro District and also is a program officer at SOA Away. The name is Hafashimana Asiimwe. Fasha, we are happy to have you.
Asante Bwana. Yeah, hello viewers. I'm so much privileged but also humbled to have one or two things to share with young people outside there, and just to correct something that is very important. I happen to be a technical staff at the Youth Line Forum, not SOA, as you said. Just keep on moving.
You left SOA.
I left SOA.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, but we are happy for the growth.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. At the extreme end is a lawyer by training and a youth leader all the way from Jinja City. The name is Dalton Tim Gonga. It's the first time on the show. Timothy, we're happy to have you.
It's my pleasure to be on this show. I would like to thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that my ideas and words will impact the youth of this country as we all expect. Thanks.
Well, we are very happy to have you as well. The last on the show is a gentleman from a new youth student outfit, dubbed the New Bold Vision. We have had the leader of that team here. Today we host the spokesperson of the New Bold Vision. The name is Masereka. We're happy to have you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here. My name is Edison Masereka.
Yes.
I also teach. I am a teacher with St. Julian High Schools. I teach English and literature, and I also do work with public speaking and also working with a New Bold Vision as a spokesperson. Pleasure being here.
Interesting.
Thank you.
So what is New Bold Vision about?
It's a youth-led movement working for a better country, especially in regards to the young people being the majority in this country. Today we are discussing unemployment. Young people are having so many challenges with unemployment, a lack of leadership skills, and so many issues to do with their well-being. So we are a new movement of young people raising up to see if we can add a stone in building the future of our young people and also bettering ourselves for tomorrow.
Wow,
and crafting the future that we want.
Wow.
Yes.
Very interesting. Sounds very articulate.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Asiimwe, let's just begin with the topic right away. Unemployment. There's a young person out there who last week was very happy to graduate from Makerere University. They put on that gown and they went and had the party and all those things. What future awaits them?
It is trickless in a manner that, like you said it in the preamble of this discussion, many graduate from institutions. When you just talk about Makerere University, which graduated last week, Chambogo University graduated just a month back.
Yes, sure.
And there is no much big difference as far as time frame is concerned. Of course, when you graduate, of course, at the bachelor's level, one, excitement is important, but also the happiness. Why? Because families go through a lot, selling domestic animals, selling pieces of land back at home to ensure that at least 1 or 2 sons and daughters in their families can attain that qualification on paperwork. But when you see and you talk about unemployment, the issue doesn't just stem from the bureau, it comes from the education system. Yes, if over 40,000 graduate per year from the institutions of higher learning, do we even put into account of how many people have been seated at home? So whereas you are graduating and celebrating, the next day you are joining the unemployed Baruch youth group. That would equatively mean that as we look further forward, a lot of people are there. In fact, from the National Planning Authority, recently they established notice that over 70,000 youth people, in fact 700,000 youth await for jobs each and every year. And only that even when we have about 4.2% of the youth that should be the ratio of those that are unemployed within the both private and the public sectors, it is in account that there are only 9,000 jobs. So if you find the others that are more than 10,000, 40,000, then where shall these people go? That means we go back to the education system. So that means the stem or the outsource or the source of each and every challenge that is associated within unemployment comes from how each of us is taught. If you are an engineer, or if they are engineers, they will testify they can easily finish university and graduate, and maybe in less than a year they can get somewhere to work. Why? Because when an engineer is being taught, they have skills, they do practicals. People who do biochemical engineering and mechatronics, they can easily go in the hospitals, in the laboratories, and begin these things practically. Other than a person who has done development studies, a person who has done social sciences without practical skills in nature. I happen to be a teacher of economics and history, but the question would be, does that which I study address the current challenges in our communities? Of course, the answer is two-way if we go deep into that. But long story short, we are taught things that do not address the current challenges in our societies. You have heard of the app today whereby when you want to ask it a question, I think it is GPT something. Chat GPT. Yes. So when you have a question, you just type it in that app, then you can easily get answers. Look at how UNEB assesses our students today. Look at how we assess at universities. Does this ask us a question of time? Of course, the answer is yes. World is moving on. Even when you look at China, China's employment problem is not much as Uganda, even when in Africa, African countries have tried to address some of these issues. Ever than before, Uganda is in fact, should be the first or second leading in population growth for the youth. Looking at how many people are studying, there are many people who are competing within agriculture, but does the government address issues that we are facing as the young people? When you look at the ring fencing, I remember myself, you with other youth leaders convened at one time at PPDA, addressing such things, how the young people could benefit from what is available for the government in the procurement sector, something like that. So has the government come on to ensure that maybe it has ring-fenced some of these properties whereby a youth with this amount of money can easily access this kind of an asset to ensure that they can do something for themselves? Back to the main point, the challenges we are facing as graduates, or those that are about to graduate and those that have already graduated, they come from how each of us are taught from universities. A lawyer can easily behave like a kangaroo in the country we are in, just because for them after or in their second years at a law school, they can easily conduct some of the, moot debates, something like that. So they can easily, they go to court to practice. So at the end of the 3 or 4, 5 years, they can easily hang around the Kampala. That's why I have seen some of the graduates, after getting your degree, you cannot think to go back to the village. Those who go back to the village, of course, is agriculture. But out of the 40,000 who graduate per year, how many can go back to the village to do all that? So the main question is that how can we ask our younger people that even when there is an unemployment rate in Uganda increasing day and day, how can they fit within it? How can we fight about it? That means we need to go back to the education ministry. Recently, there was a meeting, I think, at UMA. The Uganda Manufacturers Association. And I think the Minister State for Education, Honorable Peter Gwang, has been very clear. Of course, we also recall that today where we are taught in our primaries, in our secondary schools, especially for UCE and UPEs, people have been compelled to pay some amount of money. Remember, when you go beyond that, education is expensive. We have seen commentaries about Taiba School, whereby a nursery kid is paying 3.6 a lot. So you could imagine, even when we have the Education Act 2008 in section 9 subsection 1, that nobody shall be allowed to levy and ask every student or a pupil in those UPEs, but people are evaluating all of this, but are they held accountable? Of course not. So the main question is that we need to blame the current education system because it does not avail a chance for our young people or for those who are about to graduate and those that have graduated to be able to creatively think and address the challenges that we are facing. If I went back to my community where I come from in Chisoro, and I saw there was maybe a problem of early marriages, can I be able, or can our youth be asked to creatively think around and maybe I come up with an app that can easily address, like that chat GPT, that maybe if there's a problem in my community, I can easily develop an app to address those challenges at a particular moment. Look at how people are marked at UNEB. You take a month, even at universities here, marking scripts of papers for students. Now, what will you be doing in that period of time? Can you also, I happened to go to a driving school before. When you go for testing, they have online and these normal exams. But for online, you finish that, you leave that room when you know I have passed or I have not what? Passed. So if we have a lot of reviews to make, when you look at the Kajuli report of 1993, when you look at other reviews that have been within the education system, even when you see in 2021, there was the new oral revised curriculum, can each of these reviews address the current problems? The answer is taking us a lot of time. Perhaps these comrades also come in and substantiate on what we have today. But I believe the challenge is coming from how each of us is taught. Yeah.
Interesting. Edson, you've had Asiimwe. He points all these challenges to one fundamental cause, which is the education system, which perhaps, if you had to phrase it differently, it's that we are still in the colonial, sort of education system that teaches us to be job seekers rather than job creators. In your own words, to the so many students who have finished school and they're, hopeful to find a job or something, what awaits them out there? The actual reality.
It's quite a lot. When I was preparing for the show, I came across a statement that it's the educated person who has more chances of being unemployed. Maybe when you have a degree or when you have a master's, then your chances of being unemployed are actually high compared to those who are not as educated, because for them they can take on any job. But when I get out of campus, all I want is that white collar job, and I want to sit in an office, a chair which swings me around and all those things. And yet there are not so many of those jobs that we have in the country. About 20 years ago, the population of this country was not as big, and the numbers of people that were getting out of our universities were not as many. By that time, we even didn't have very many universities producing graduates at degree level. So by that time, what was happening, people were even being picked on and appointed even before they completed. One of my lecturers was telling me she completed around 2005. She was posted by the Minister of Education to teach in one of the secondary schools in the country, even before she put on her graduation gown, because there were not very many then. But these days, the universities have increased. Chambogo just graduated in December, like you've mentioned. Makerere, over 10,000 graduated this last week. Leade University recently, UC recently, Bustemo are coming up next. Very many universities. Currently, we have about 50 and counting universities in this country, compared to about 20 years ago, where maybe we had about 5 or something like that. So the population has grown. The numbers have grown. The institutions have grown. And equally, that makes the number of people getting out of our universities and other higher institutions of learning every year becoming very high. And that's contributing to the unemployment problem. But also, like Comrade Asiimwe is pointing out, we don't seem to be having much of the hands-on training in these training institutions for our young people. And yet, the dynamics have changed. When the colonialists introduced this education system, it was to train for themselves a workforce. And indeed, maybe the jobs were there. They wanted clerks, they wanted teachers, they wanted priests, they wanted, it was just literacy and numerals and those basic things, know how to read and all that. But the dynamics have changed. 50 years later, over 60 years later after independence, we can't be giving the same skill that we were giving 50 years ago or something like that. So quite a lot has changed in the way things are being done in society or the way jobs are being operated, but not so much has changed with our education system. we are still concentrating on the grades and how kids are performing. On Thursday, the UCE results are going to be released, and parents are going to be taking their children to the schools with the highest number of first grades or things like that. We are still chasing grades, but not skills. Even in the universities, it is the same problem. We want to get the first class or the top grades, but we are not minding about the practical skills and the hands-on work, yet that's what matters so much in the job world. So to the student who is about to leave campus or someone who has just left, so much awaits them, especially if you don't prepare yourself right in regards to getting a job. Sometimes even students don't have information about jobs which are out there. Sometimes the jobs will be there, but you don't have the information. You can't access the newspapers. We are not on radio to hear announcements of people advertising and all those things. Presently, it is said that in the public sector, government being one of the top employers in this country, there are about 60,000 jobs which are vacant. Maybe in teaching, in the health sector and all those things. And it's true. You go to our schools, we don't have enough teachers. Our hospitals, we don't have enough doctors. But we have young people graduating every year. They have the skills, but maybe government does not seem to have the resources to take them on. Now, it would be the private sector to take on most of these young people. But equally, the private sector institutions are not as many. For example, how many private schools do we have in this country that pay slightly above the minimum wage? Something very good maybe for a graduate who has just gotten out of campus. How many companies or schools or institutions in this country can they be able to work in that can give them some relatively good amount of money? It's quite challenging. And yet our young people would want to survive and make a living here and there. Most of them would want to stay in the city, like Comrade Asiimwe was saying. They wouldn't want to go to the village. And yet in the city, the jobs are not as many. Even if you have a job of 700K, you are supposed to get an apartment of 350K. How much are you remaining with at the end of the month?
In fact, there is no apartment of 300K.
It's not there. So it's quite challenging, especially for that student who is about to leave campus. It's a very challenging terrain, and if we don't prepare as much and equip ourselves right, especially those who are still there because they still have time, it might be quite challenging to get employment, or at least quality employment in this day and age.
Yeah, interesting. Yes, Dalton,
Yes.
On to you. The same question. The over 30,000 young people who are leaving school each and every single year that comes to an end.
Yes.
What does the picture look like outside there?
First of all, I would like to congratulate each and every person that has graduated and those that are yet to graduate. But the process of going through school, university, it's very hectic and hard because of the challenges that are there. And not all the people that graduate come from maybe wealthy families. Yeah, some are that tuition and school fees is paid of their parents' hardworking backs. But surprisingly, when they come out of university or when they graduate, what awaits them? The moment you wear that cape and throw it up when you on your graduation day, there's a lot that comes after. One of them is unemployment, which is majorly, which I can say that it is the major problem that would hinder or would affect a person who is graduating, and that comes with a lot of other things like disrespect. Like say, for example, you've been at school and you've graduated, then you're going back to your home. What will the people think of you? You see, so those are all challenges. But I would also point in the same direction. However much sometimes I interact with people and ask them what would be the cause of this unemployment that's growing, and someone would answer and say maybe corruption, maybe lack of connections or something like that. But I would also point at the education system, because our education system is more of theory oriented type of education that produces crammers and not thinkers. You know, in some countries like China, their education is majorly based on two things: producing critical thinkers, and the education is also centered on competence of the learners. You know, these people, they identify, when these children are passing through school, they identify in what fields are they competent in. Like, for example, let me give you an example in the UK. When those people see that this child is more into football, is maybe acting, music, they make sure that that kid is channeled into that same direction. That's why we find that the youth there, you can find a person of 23 years and is playing in the English Premier League. And then us here back in Uganda, we keep wondering, why is it that our people can't make it like the way those people are doing it? Reason being, our education system is more into theory other than looking into skills. However much the skill bit is coming up through the policies that government is trying to build up, but it's still lacking. You know, for example, and also most of the graduates, most of them, not all, but most of them, since they're not trained to think, they lack that aspect of being creative. You know, creativity produces a lot of ideas. Because I've seen a lot of creative people that choose what's around them to create employment. You know, for example, on social media, on TikTok, other people were employed on TikTok. They did not invest any capital, but they employed the salespersons. I see some of them sell houses, you know, some of them market things, you know, they're content creators. Of course, not all of them, but some that have tried to come up with the knowledge that would elevate them from this unemployment status that they're in. And then the other thing, there is need. There's a lot of need that the government has to do to improve on our education, system. You know, our education system is characterized of majorly two things. One is the defective curriculum, and the second one is the exam-oriented
assessment.
Assessment. You know, so I've seen students that have been bright in school. You know, they graduate with good grades.
Yeah.
And when they come out,
they can barely do a thing.
Yes, I can give an example in my field, in the legal field. You know, you can be at school and you're taught, the lecturers teach you how to register companies, how to do all those legal process.
Yeah.
But when you get out of that lecture room and you find someone outside, and maybe someone gives you instructions to register for them a company, trust me,
council will be under distress.
It would be hard for some people, because reason being that taught theory, it is not practical in class.
Council will be under distress.
So what I'm trying to say is we should try as much as possible to refrain from this education system that is training us to be more of crammers to one that is student-centered. Yes, based on
innovative.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. But okay, guys, let's just because at least what I picked from the three of you, you all seem to agree that one of the core issues is the education system. That I think, for lack of a better word, I would prefer to call it, maybe it is colonial in nature.
Yes.
But I think looking at the bigger picture, I think that even if we had the kind of education system that we have today, for as long as there were job opportunities, I think that these people, with whatever skills they've attained from school, would still find an opportunity out there. So do we think that, for example, the private sector is working? Because we all agree here that government can only employ around 8,000. Government has only around 8,000 jobs, all right? And these jobs are not increasing. In fact, I was watching the news this week, and government is mooting the idea of rationalization, you know, merging. So that only indicates to you that government and public service is no longer a sustainable option. So we must look towards the private sector. The private sector must be able to work, to expand their enterprises and create more jobs.
Yes.
So how do we evaluate the performance of the private sector? Is it one that offers a beam of hope? Asiimwe, the private sector and how it is looking. Do they have access to soft credit? Is government doing enough to put money, for example, in UDB, so that these investors can have access to this money, reinvest in their businesses. So I don't know, how do you evaluate the private sector as a solution towards unemployment?
As I address that, whatever you're talking about was captured within the 1894 Berlin Conference in Berlin back then. And if you're talking about colonialism being the root cause of whatever you're going through, especially the unemployment problem that we have today in Uganda, in fact, worldwide over, unemployment is a challenge. But for Uganda, it is alarming. It is a barrier. Now, further forward, the private sector has had a space, especially in trying to address the current problem. When you look at the other macro and the microeconomic challenges that we have here in Uganda, unemployment has been the order of the day. But even when the government has given a space for some of the private entities, it is still the same challenge. Only that the credit would be due to the fact that we have seen our young people who finish or who graduate, but they are not employed among the other 8,000 or 9,000. So where do they go? They are absorbed within the private sectors. That would mean that if Comrade Masereka was not employed, I do not want to think that maybe St. Juliana is a government. That means it is private. That means this comrade is accommodated within there. Only that even when the problem is really alarming, these people who are within the private sector, their working condition is also really scaring. You are working, you're a teacher, you paid your millions of money, but you are sleeping on a mattress. You are like working as if you're working for AIM Global. But when you finish at the end of the day, it does not, you go to a classroom, your shoe is bending on one side. So even when the private sector has given a space for some of, or to address this challenge of unemployment, the working conditions, the allowances, or the pay or the reward, the wage issue, we also know the government has not addressed that wage something. And yes, and I want to believe that the private sector has come in to address this problem, but even then, the youth are running away from that. Of course, you know, when you finish from any university, even if it was certificate, you want to think of sitting in an office. The private sector also would talk about the informal sector, whereby when you finish and maybe even if you are a university graduate, the best thing you can do is to do border. Why? Because border you think it will earn you or it will give you money daily or even per hour. At the end of the day, you are somehow a little bit better than that other person who has kept at home waiting to sit and get a job that is white collar, to sit in an office to work. We have had other colleagues within the informal sector. I want to combine the two, whereby when you finish, one that is also a threat to our environment, that you can go and involve yourself into charcoal burning, which is also very bad. At the end of the day, we shall not receive rainfall. Okay? But why are those things happening? Because of how the government has created this space for young people to suffer. It is not really all about the private sector, because even those who are there, they are not happy. Recently, I also watched the news and somebody was saying, I am there because I have no other option. But even when I'm there, things are not moving on well. So looking at our colleagues who are teaching, I told them I'm a teacher. May I have not affiliated myself to that. I will teach in other capacities. When we come here and we address these problems, we are what? Teachers. We are teaching. Yes. And at the end of the day, it does not matter how much I get, but how much we impact our societies. So the private sector has done it, but if it has done so, why then are we having increased rates of unemployment? So even the private sector has not done enough to address the challenge, even when effort has been there. When you go back in the 19...
But also, let me just put this for context, is that the private sector is not a duty bearer. What do I mean? I mean that the private sector is not like the state or the government. They don't have a duty to create jobs.
Yeah.
Government simply needs to enable them, and in their aspirations of making profit, with the conducive business environment, they're able to create jobs. But it is not, they don't owe us. The private sector doesn't owe the people they don't owe people jobs. They are a private entity. They're there to make business. The jobs that they create is only to enable their businesses to work and to grow. So the question is, how can government support the private sector so that in their aspirations of making profit and doing business, they inevitably are able to expand their businesses and create more jobs. But we cannot blame the private sector because, again, like I said, they don't owe us anything. The people who owe us, with whom we have a contract with, is the government. We have a social contract between the people and the government. So the government owes us a living. They owe us a conducive environment. They owe us better infrastructure. They owe us because we have a contract with them, which we don't have with the private sector. So I just put that into, to qualify it, is that the private sector should be supported for them to grow. Yes. And in their growth, they inevitably support the young people by creating more jobs. But yes, continue with your point.
Yeah, in fact, that was my next point. You know, when you are sharing, you must arrange your points in order of need.
Sure.
But thank you. So now, you see, there is what we call protectionism in economics.
True.
That means we are looking at the home industries that are being affected by those that come from outside the country. And when you look at what the government puts, maybe like tariff barriers, all those other economic inputs to ensure that our industry within home are protected, when you woke up one day and you began up a private entity, the next day the government will come and say, KCCA, we need a license. And at the end of the day, this person who has begun that private entity is frustrated. Either if they have been paying the staff at their workplace, they will ensure that they overwork, but also with the same pay, or little pay. In the days, they used to call them cheap and abundant labor. You are there because there is no choice. So maybe the government, I would agree with you exactly that government is largely to blame. Why? Because there is no conducive atmosphere or the working environment for some of these private entities. When you look at the Chinese who come in Uganda, when you take your road, Yole, Guru Highway, and reach around in Nakasongora, Ruwero, there are a lot of swamps there. The government has, what has it done? It has allowed these people to establish their factories. And on top of that, it is either acquired for free or that does not qualify that piece of land. Beyond that, isn't it a wetland? What does the law or the policy talk about wetland use? Something like that. Beyond that, do we also put in account that these guys are given tax holidays, which are not very common to our local people who are establishing these other private-owned businesses. So at the end of the day, it is the government supposed to acquire or, in fact, avail a free space or something that would accommodate our people to be absorbed within private sector. That would mean that if the taxes are either subsidized or in some, because we cannot scrap off taxes now, because also the government benefits from tax collection. So when you look at what the government is doing today, perhaps I would urge the government to think on the private sector by simply availing a free and a fair environment for business operators, and therefore our young people would be absorbed. That if you're earning 500 per month, maybe depending on what you are doing, the government is very fair in levying taxes to these other business institutions. And then you, as a younger man, you accommodate while we are there. In fact, I got bothered when we began this show that in case a feminist came here, perhaps maybe they have an NGO or they have a civil society, something like that, then they would, oh, what is not happening? So there is always a demand and a need to each and every person. So the government could easily understand what does the private sector expect from us. If we have already plotted and we know now after compiling, that we need this, can we do that? If every Monday there are cabinet meetings, what comes out of those meetings? Can it favor the private environment on how people operate in? And I think much more to do with that. So looking further forward, I want to say that the government could, because it is very possible by either way, if it has the capacity to say now, even if there is the Ministry of Lands, let us put State House Lands Unit. If there is the IGG office, let us also establish the anti-corruption unit at State House. So if it has the capacity to do all of that, then it can even do that we're talking about today. That in that capacity, it has the capacity to say, no, this is not good, it is not fair, it does not really give the best to the human or the citizens of this country. Let us ask each and every private sector to comply with this, but which is very fair. Therefore, the private sector also say, oh, okay, the government has now come in to play its role to ensure that our young people would thrive within the economy. But beyond that, then we shall not do anything. In case the government does not really give a free and fair business environment to our people in Uganda.
Okay, fair enough. You know, I am smiling because you've emphasized the word free. So I'm thinking, are there free things anymore today in this global capitalistic world? I think even the government might find it might drag its feet when it comes to giving you something for free.
Oh, yes.
But I agree. The point is that because you introduce a broad conversation, which is the idea of citizenship, and you've mentioned it maybe in passing, but what you're saying is that the economic approach of our government is outward looking. We are trying to attract all these foreign direct investors and forgetting our own our own domestic players right here, and forgetting to empower them, forgetting to subsidize, utilities, and therein reduce their factors of production. So reduce the cost of production, right? But also, we seem to be putting them as at a class of citizenship ahead of the indigenous Ugandan here, which I think is rather problematic, because the way those multinational companies operate is they come here, put up an enterprise, but the profits go back to their countries. There is capital flight, because if you look at KFC, Shell, these are multinationals, but I can assure you the profits
even in Benzoli.
Yes. So I think Asiimwe's point is we need to begin to invest more in the local wananchi. Let us begin to grow these businesses. So Masereka, still on the private sector, because he asked a question that now I want to ask you as well, because my job here is to ask questions. He says that, what does the private sector need? Do they need access to credit? Do they need market? What do they need for them to grow, expand their businesses, and in so doing, create more job opportunities? What do they need?
Thank you very much. The last 20 years or so I've seen the rise of the private sector in regards to creating employment opportunities in this country. We have seen in the last 20 years a rise in the number of private schools, private universities, institutions, health facilities, maybe factories and all those things in the last 20 years or so. And they have done quite a good job in as far as boosting our economy and providing employment opportunities for our young people who cannot be absorbed by the government. But like you've said, most of these are multinationals. They are from outside countries. They are businesses. They are here for profit. If they can give you some 20 or 100 jobs, it's just you're here to make money and all that. So if they can just give a few jobs or something like that, we can give them credit. We can give them credit for that. But the role of the government is to give a conducive environment under which the private sector is going to play. For example, if somebody wanted to go and set up a cocoa processing factory in Wundubujo, where I come from, so that we don't export raw seeds of cocoa, then the government should put a road in Wundubujo, put electricity in Wundubujo, subsidize the access to electricity so that they are not overcharged, and provide things like water and all those, so that this person who is setting up the factory is able to do their work very well, but at the same time provide work. Just imagine, for example, some of these things, agriculture is very key to our country, but unfortunately, we only export raw. Export raw coffee, export raw cocoa, export cotton, and not processed. Just imagine how many jobs you would be able to create in this country if factories or processing farms were set up in those districts which produce those commodities. Quite a lot of jobs would be created. So what? The role of the government, creating a conducive environment for these people to establish and also be able to operate. Access to credit is a very important aspect, that especially in helping the local players. The government seems to be attracted to these term investors. Everybody who comes from outside, they are termed as an investor and all those things, and the government will rush to help them, give them tax holidays for 5 years, give them some very good land in the industrial parks which are setting up in our cities across the country.
I saw NBS run an exclusive on that same, and they're pointing light into these so-called investors.
Oh yes.
And a case in point was Akon, the Senegalese pop star, who came here in the ambits of an investor. Oh my God! Government was quick to find him land somewhere at the expense of the domestic settlers who were there. They were almost evicted off their land. So government can go to whatever extent, even if it means undermining the property rights of its own citizens to create space for these investors. So I agree with you.
And you know, for someone to, most of us people, when they come in from outside countries, as long as the person has about $100,000 plus, then they qualify as an investor or something like that, and the government will give them all those benefits. And yet, in this country, we have businessmen who have much more money than that. We have businessmen who could have even $1 million to invest in this country, but sometimes the conditions are not as effective enough. So how can the government then support local players? The emphasis should be on empowering more of the local players, because by the end of the day, their money remains here. If I am from maybe Bugisu, where there is so much coffee, and I go and set up a coffee processing plant there, the money remains there. The money does not go out of this country. It develops our real economy. Young people right there will be able to be given employment opportunity and all that. But then the loan rates are very high. We can't access credit. We access it at very high interest and exorbitant.
Commercial banks lend at 24%.
Yes, that's too much. That's suicidal. That's suicidal.
Yeah, that's exorbitant.
More than 50% of businesses which begin, first-time business in this country, don't go past their third birthday? You know, it's a serious problem. So how many of our local investors are able to stand so that they can be able to create employment for our young people? COVID was here recently. You saw a number of schools closing. After when now schools reopened, so many people sold their schools. People closed their hospitals and sold them because people didn't have money, the economy was down, and all those different challenges. So the government is supposed to create a conducive environment for the private sector to play, because we have to admit it, the government can't just provide all the jobs. The private sector plays a very critical role. And then also for those, maybe the multinationals, the government welcomes them, give them a conducive environment for them to operate, and not giving them as many privileges compared to our locals, but at the same time put conditions for them to benefit the country more. Maybe tell them, instead of putting up in Kampala, go and put up in Mbarara or Fort Portal, so that we can grow these cities and so that our young people don't have to come maybe to the city looking for jobs. We have that high rate of young people coming to the city and looking for jobs and all that. And yet, if, for example, I am earning 700,000, it is better to earn 700,000 in the village than earning it in Kampala. So maybe if somebody could go and set up a factory or a school in Fort Portal or not in Kampala, it could benefit our young people who are back there, and that would be a very good thing. So the government needs to support the private sector as much in their operations, and by putting much and more emphasis on the local players, and also like the multinationals, encouraging them to set up here. Maybe if it's Toyota, instead of importing cars, why can't they come and set up an assembling plant here, so that we have more people employed in that? It could equally help in curbing some of these unemployment challenges, and so that we can stop importing everything. The small things which we import, like toothpicks, like salt, table salt, and all those things, can be made here. Maybe the government could put a ban on some of those things, so that people come and set up the factories right here or the plants right here, so that the jobs are created right here. Imagine if 10 jobs, 20 jobs, 1,000 are created here and there, it would be a very good thing. And also in the private players, the locals, the government has put more emphasis on the big names. Of course, we have some of them who are equally going through issues. But the government has tended to put more emphasis on the big names and ignoring these small ones. The big names who already have, who can go to any bank and borrow or something like that. Though we have seen some of them suffer. For example, Patrick Peter, man I admire so much, has been battling with some loan he got from some bank outside and all that. Yes, some of them have been having issues and all that. But the government also needs to go down and make it so easy for that young man who is starting his small business, maybe with just 15 million to be able to play effectively. Give him soft loans in the bank and all that. We've had initiatives like Emioga, and they have not helped as much. Money has been eaten and all those things. If the government can put more in maybe putting soft loans in the banks, which young people can access, and maybe because the jobs really are not enough, but supporting the creative young people, the performing arts, the creativity, the innovation and ICT and all those things, so that our young people can be able to market their products, manufacture, and do all those sorts of things. It can help us with curbing the unemployment problem.
Interesting, fantastic. Timothy.
Yes.
Now, he speaks about the aspect of credit,
Yes.
and he does so very articulately,
Yes.
is that government needs to be able to have, you know, soft credit available.
Yes.
But, you know, this credit must come from somewhere. For government to put money in Uganda Development Bank at an interest rate of 5%, this money must come from somewhere.
Yes.
So do you think currently the nature of our public expenditure, that we spend so much money, for example, in things like public administration, do you think that, because now the budget framework was actually read sometime last week, you look at the budget framework, is it one that is the money going to the right places for us to be able to speak with confidence and say that, okay, our government is investing money in the right places, and therefore we expect a tangible outcome, like, you know, money is going to UDB, it is going to agro processing industries and things like that. That is one. Two, as a lawyer, you could perhaps speak to the aspect of policy here, because the comrades here portray that the tax regime is not favorable, that you open up a business and before you know it, KCCA, URA, PAYE, NSSF, they are knocking at your door.
Yes.
Before you know it, you cannot break even and the business is going to collapse. So from a policy point of view, does the legal framework as it stands today, you look at the Public Finance Management Act, you look at the URA Act, do these policies, do they enable an emerging, a mushrooming business to grow and therein, you know, expand and create more opportunities?
Okay, right. Thanks very much. On the first point about the expenditure of the nation, well, that's a very important thing because currently I would term Uganda as an expensive beggar or borrower.
Oh, interesting.
Yes. So this means that, okay, it's like, for example, it's like a person who would go on borrowing to sustain his lavish expenditure.
lifestyle.
Yes, posh lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yes. You know, when you look at the things that our country is spending money, for example, I'll give an example in the parliament. You know, I'm sorry to say this, but I think the number of members of parliament we have in this country need to be reduced. For example, where I come from in Jinja, because it was Jinja, then it was divided into two.
Became a city.
Yes, there is Jinja City and Jinja District. Jinja City has like 4 MPs. Jinja District has 3 to 2 MPs. So there are like 7 people there, and they are all paid. you know, I was reading somewhere, and I got surprised that India has like a lot of people than us, and it's also bigger than us, but we have the highest number of MPs than them. You get? And these people are there, some of them are seated in parliament doing nothing.
Actually, let alone the presidential advisors.
Yes.
Let alone the number of RDCs.
Exactly.
Let alone all these other things.
Yes. A lot of people, and these are funded from the consolidated fund. You know?
With
so
lead cars, with
cars,
all these things.
allowances, flights, everything. And you
With
know,
right of way of the
some of
lead
them
car.
are starting to say that when, let's say, God forbid, when they pass on, you know, the state is supposed maybe to give them, some of them want houses to be constructed for them, what you get. So all of that expenditure, that money, let's say in case it's diverted into supporting this private sector, somehow the number of unemployment would be reduced.
Yeah.
Yes. However much, government has also tried to uplift the private sector by putting into place policies, for example, liberalizing the private sector. For example, in the construction sector, the media, you know, those sectors have employed a number of youths. Yeah. Yes, but still, as Comrade has pointed out,
Hafashimana.
yes, Hafashimana has pointed out, these people are paid like they're underpaid. For example, there is no one who regulates payment in the private sector. For example, you would find that I own a school and he owns a school, but I would pay my teachers a different sum of salary, then he would also pay according to what he feels like. You get it? So those are some of the challenges that are still facing the private sector, you know, and we would urge the government maybe to work and polish onto some so that, yes. And about the tax regime, well, I would say that to some extent, the taxes that are levied on these companies and businesses are quite high. For example, from the startup process of establishing a business, you have to pay taxes, you know, company name reservation, all those ones are taxes that you have to pay to URSB, you know. Now, after you've established your company, you have now to let's say buy equipment. Everything is being taxed. Everything that you touch on taxes. So at some point you find that some people are failing to start up businesses, like he has mentioned.
Later on, maintain it.
Yes, and maintain
sustain it.
Yes. Yeah. That's why you find that a person is in business 2 years and is like, after you ask him after like 2 years and he's like, I failed. Yeah, because of the taxes and everything. You've been hearing business people complaining. In Misolo, Jirinyi, everything.
Yes, but you see, and Masereka mentioned it earlier on, although he mentioned it in passing, which is that, you see, even when government has had interventions to support the private sector, a good example is the Bitature case that went up to High Court. Was it mezzanine case? Is that, you see, even government in its support, it appears to be selective and I don't use the word discriminative, but you see, the people who benefit from government financial support appear to be a given class of people. All right. When we are hosting the NAM and G27, we saw Parliament appropriating money to particular individuals. All right. Now, when are the other businesses going to grow if government only cares to support a given category
who already people up there?
Yes. So I don't know, and that's why I asked you. Is there a need for a policy framework whereby government in its support must follow a given criteria, a given standard? Can there be distributive justice, sort of, like in terms of opportunities, that government, for them to use taxpayers' money to bail out a business, to give out loans, it must be distributive. So do you think there is a lacuna? Is there a legal regime that is still missing for us to address the issue of fair and distributive support across the private sector?
Yes, policies are there because there is the Equal Opportunities Act.
Yeah, actually.
Yes. This talks about fair treatment, and also in our constitution there is equality, of everyone. But in Uganda we've been faced by a problem. There is the factor and then the jury.
The jury, yeah.
Yes. So the factor means that what's on ground, what are the facts, and the jury means what's in the law.
Yeah.
The law is speaking something different, equality, but in the fact, there's nothing like equality.
Actually, I think it was Dr. Kawumba who said that Uganda's laws are a castle built on a wetland.
Exactly.
That the laws are fantastic.
Yes,
but the foundation on which they're built is very fluid, and therefore they are subject to abuse, subject to molest. Yes. So good point right there. Yes. But we need to shift gears before we take a short commercial break. Is that Asiimwe, maybe we are looking too much within a narrow perspective. Maybe the solution towards empowering the private sector lies in the vision of the East African Federation, in the vision of the African Free Continental Trade Area. Africa trades at a level of 16% within itself. Only. Can you imagine? Only 16% within ourselves. Most of our trade in Africa is with European countries. We are procuring more from Europe than we procure from within ourselves. So maybe is the solution to our unemployment, to the private sector question, the issue of access to market, is it in the broader vision of the integration, one, of the East African community, two, of the continent? Maybe let's just dare to dream big.
Let me throw some light on that. In the last 3 decades, there used to be a senator in the States. And the senator was a product of a family whereby the father was a drunkard. And I think I just want to tell you this in a few seconds. And this father had 2 sons. One of them became a senator, one of them was a drunkard. So when each of them were interviewed, and the one who was a drunkard was asked, you are a drunkard, but you are from a family whereby you have a senator in the States, what went wrong? So this drunkard told the journalist that I am drunk because I saw an example of my dad, and that's why I chose to be a drunkard. Then the senator was also asked, why did you choose to become a senator? And you were in fact influencing things in the States. And this senator said, or told the journalist that I chose to become a senator or to study because I saw an example of my dad. So there are 2 personalities using one example. And perhaps we are the majority youth, but also the minority in decision making. We are the majority in numbers, but we are the minority in influencing. So using one example, which in that case is, we have had a lot of integrations, by the way. When you look in the 1970s, when we had Idi Amin Dada, when you look at the PTA, the Preferential Trade Area, that Uganda itself hosted in 1975, and a lot of other federations, when you look at CAF and many others. So the question, you see, integration is only viable when you have something to put in, a common interest. And I think President Museveni talked about that recently, when he's saying that the Westerners are asking him, are you pro us? Then the Arabs also ask, are you pro us? So the main thing is what? Interest. So unless I have something I can benefit from that, then there is nothing. You have seen the Africa Masereka has been integrated so far to 8 countries. And as of today, you know, you're organizing a conference tomorrow for the younger people for the League ya Vijana in Cavendish. So such collaborations, of course, issues to do with collaboration, having integrations are very good, because even an economy whereby you do not have to integrate it, then you cannot develop. But in integrating and having each of these other treaties signed and each of whatnot, what is the end game as Ugandans? If you can first settle ourselves, President Museveni said that if you want to take over power as younger people, first you get organized. And in the Pan-African context, we say, organize, don't under what? Don't antagonize. So things of the sort. So if we can only first organize ourselves, then we shall say we are set for East Africa community. Then we are set for ECOWAS. Of recent, you saw Burkina Faso and I think Niger or Nigeria, they have withdrawn
from the
ECOWAS. And perhaps because the interest of the community does not fit within these countries' interests.
You've gone far. Okay. It was an
example.
But even here, Congo, Kinshasa and was it
South Sudan?
No, it was Nairobi and
Tanzania.
And yes,
about the aviation.
Yes.
I saw. So when you look at East Africa having such a scuffle of you won't land in our country, we won't land in your country, we are revenging back. So how shall we build this East African community? And every day we are expanding. If Somalia demanded to be part of the community, what if another country like Ethiopia says, no, we are also becoming part of you? What if other countries are fitted to East African community by demographics? What if also no? So how shall they find this community existing already? Don't even look very far. In 2019, you know what was between us and our neighbors there? Until when political talk started emerging up. I think the whole issue is mindset. Like I gave an example of this drunkard and the senator. The issue was mindset. I chose this because I saw an example of dad. I became this because I saw an example of my father. Something like that. So if at all we want to indulge ourselves into that collaboration, networking with other countries, what can they offer to us? In the old tradition, there used to be barter trade. That if I had maize and I needed maybe sorghum, I would negotiate with you. You bring me sorghum, I give you my maize. Something like that. So it's the same thing. So it is maybe barter trade in a modern context. So if Uganda has something to offer to Kenya, you have had also another saga between Uganda and Kenya over milk. But Uganda didn't back a fire. It said, no, you are brothers and what? And sisters. So at the end of the day, there should be what should build Uganda, but also vis-a-vis the community at large. You might recall that you just talked about the NAM summit and the G77 plus China. You know, you have had discussions around this one, and I think it could be one of the integrations. In fact, when Mzee took over power in the 1986, I think the same year, there was the same conference in Zimbabwe. And this Mzee was elected as the vice chairperson of the NAM. So when he returned back, a fellow Africans came, because you remember there was an issue of building the blocks of Casablanca and Monrovia. So Gaddafi from Libya and Thomas Sankara by then, they came to Uganda. The same happened. So when they came, the issue was to ensure that how do we build one Africa? You have heard of the African Free Continental Trade Area, the AFCTFT, something like that. So at the end of the day, how could we tap into it? Whose interest is it even serving?
Good question.
Yeah.
I think all this boils down to what interests you have both as a nation and as a continent. But I think for as long as these interests are in the in goodwill of the people, I think it should not be detrimental. See you shortly after this commercial break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We'll be back from that very short commercial break. Hope you enjoyed the adverts. Yeah, but we shall dive straight to the chase as to where we stopped. But also we are joined by the fourth and last panelist, counsel and lawyer by training, Peter. Peter, we are happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, let's just continue, colleagues, from where we had stopped. Still, we are trying to really evaluate, because we don't want to read from the book of Lamentations. We want to be the pragmatic group of people who are going to try to offer solutions. So we have tried to look at the education system, what needs to be reviewed therein. Then we went into now the private sector as a second alternative to as from public service. And we have tried to propose solutions here and there. But also there is an emerging sector of technology, right? And there is this whole fear of, okay, already we don't have jobs. Now we are having technology, we are having machines, we are having robots coming into the picture. I think for the lawyers there is who? There is that. Sorry, there's that robotic lawyer that was
that was introduced.
I don't know, but okay. But the point is technology vis-a-vis unemployment. Is there a correlation between the two? And if so, what is it exactly? So I'll just begin with
technology is a game changer, especially in employment. Of course, it will somehow reduce a few people and displace them from the jobs, but to a greater extent, it's going to contribute to a big number of employment opportunities. Things like robotics and all that may replace some hands-on people at work and all those things. In the banks, the auto teller system and so many other sophistications have replaced people and all that, but technology has created quite a number of employment opportunities. Right now, people can work remotely. I can work in Kenya, with the firm in Kenya, when I'm in Uganda. You can be a graphics designer for a company if you have the skill.
That's right.
The company is based in Mbale and you're here in Kampala. You've never been to their offices, but you do work with them online. It's a very good thing. And also people who are harnessing technology are doing quite well. If you look at the Western countries, they are doing so well in tackling numbers of rates of unemployment because of technology. High populated countries like China and India and Nigeria are tackling unemployment so much using technology. you're going into the performing arts and publishing online, you're going into the movies, you're going into creating online platforms, gaming and all those things. They are creating so many of employment opportunities and enabling people to be able to work online. So it's a very good thing. And so it will also go back to the education system to ensure that by the time people are leaving campus, they are aware of these emerging technologies. They are aware of basic ICTs and how to go about those things. I was interacting with a friend of mine recently. We are going to be graduating together, and he still can't use Microsoft Word so well. And you're like, 3 years at campus, and you can't handle basics of a computer and all that. So back to the universities, they should ensure that there is enough training, redesign the courses to move with the trends, that by the time a person is getting out, they know what is available for them. Somebody knows how to craft their CV on LinkedIn, so that maybe someone can be able to pick them up, follow companies online and all those things. Then people are also using the technology to create. Content creation is a very critical aspect these days in entertainment, in education, in marketing, in health, in marketing and all those things. People are doing so many of online marketing. Young people are earning so much by being social media influencers. You've seen this young man of Juma Wasavalonyo at Moves.
Yes.
The young man,
are you campaigning for
I'm not
him
campaigning
here?
for him, but just look at that young man who was boosting him. And the young man is now on TV. People now know him. I mean, he's now a brand because of technology. So it's a game changer. In countries like Nigeria, people are making movies and marketing them online on YouTube channels. People are earning big sums of money, more than civil servants, because they have YouTube channels, because they have social media pages that you know, and all those things. People are earning a lot through TikTok and creating content. Ugandans want to be entertained so much. So if you know you're so good at comedy, you may not access a stage platform in Kampala in Kampala, but you can be able to go online and put your content. I mean, look at Uncle Mo and how much he's doing online. I mean, Uncle Mo has not been to any stand-up comedy show to perform physically, but look at how much online and technology has sold him in Africa all over, and the kind of content he's doing all here. So to those who are aware of emerging technologies and all that, we can be able to harness technology for us to like manage our craft and put our best foot forward, that maybe by the time we are getting out of the university, we can find some opportunities there. Looking for job opportunities, applying to companies and all those things. Most companies right now, they don't put their adverts in newspapers, they put them online. So if you don't follow them maybe on their X or Facebook or LinkedIn, you won't know they have advertised even when you have the competence that they are requiring. So it's here to stay, and it's a game changer, and it's up to us to harness it. And then of course the government putting a lot, injecting more in the technologies, ensuring there is internet accessibility all across the country, ensuring that our schools and training institutions have access to internet, and also reducing the costs of maybe data, so that I don't have to buy a GB at 5,000 and Airtel takes it in 5 minutes or 1 hour, something like that, so that the costs are low, so that those who are able to play and go about unemployment using technology, they can be able to have a free and fair environment.
Peter, sorry, Edison, thank you very much. I mean, very elaborate and articulate on how best, you know, we can use technology and IT and you know, machine learning to enhance you know, whatever we are trying to do. And yeah, fair enough. Peter, I want to introduce you to the conversation. And first of all, just pick your general comments about the unemployment status in our country, but two, introduce us into the conversation of the governance question. Because I think that so many of these challenges lie within the governance question, that if you resolve the issue of governance, that if you have a government that respects rule of law, that if you have a government that you know, that is bound by the principles of say equity, then they would know better or how best to run a state. They'll know better how best to invest taxpayers' money in a way that it benefits the general population. So your comments about the unemployment status, then the aspect of governance as the elephant in the room.
Okay, thank you, Kidega, for that question. I think I'll answer it twofold. The status, really, I think it's it would be very sad not to say that we seem to have been left on our own, you know, to struggle to see how we are in this state and we're surviving, but also the fact that we seem not to be given a ray of hope even after an education of sort. Somebody goes to university 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending on what course they are doing. But after they have exited, there's energy to say, I have made it. I have. But then the biggest question, I think, at the back of their mind, what next? I think that's an important question in terms of addressing this. What's the status of the unemployment? So I don't think I might need to go into the statistics. There's a recent report that was even made, a research by experts in 2022, where they have even demonstrated policies on how government can intervene on the unemployment question. Obviously, the reports indicate there is a likelihood of a drop if the programs are taken up, the initiatives are taken up.
Could you just mention some of them?
So one of them, obviously, I think maybe would stick, if my colleagues could have hinted on these, the Youth Livelihood Program. You've heard about that. So there was that, which was introduced by government, speaking to the governance question. This was an initiative really to alleviate people from, poverty and put them to better pedestal. I think the first question that for me, I think I was looking at is the structure, because, the other thing is bringing a demo or an initiative. Is it tailored to meet the need? That's the other first question, because as a governance question, like you've rightly placed, is an element where if you're tooling me with money, if I'm just out of university and say, yes, there's where I can go and get 1 million shillings, if I don't have the financial, readiness and ability to invest it, to multiply it, will I be able to say that I'm going to, is that initiative working for me? That's the first thing. Because at the end of the day, if it's a program initiated to say, yes, I can get the resource, but I don't have the technical knowledge on how I can multiply this resource, then I don't think that initiative is actually going to, work. It's just going to hover over somebody's head, get the money, right? And then that's why we had issues with later, if you've seen again the policy, was the non-payment problem of where people are not returning, and that speaks to, again, why are these people picking the money? That's the first thing. If the livelihood program was to alleviate the youth from those initiatives, or even startups, right? We could speak to that, and there are kind of different strategies that I could speak to in terms of, startups. It could be the presidential initiatives, the skilling program, that the president has set up, still on the governance question. And I think the very most recent one is the parish development model. If you could look at that, it is a part of the NDA part 3 of the government's initiative, really still on the government. It's still one of those models. But the biggest question people are asking, if I could relate to the parish development model, again, to some of the skilling and tooling, is people are wondering, if I get this money, what am I going to use it for? If I got the 1 million shillings right now, I think that's the first. Is that initiative designed to meet the need? Because that's the first thing. Then secondly, how sustainable is that? Because if we're going to continuously hand over pockets, changes of 1 million, certain, it's very okay. It's a very beautiful initiative. The first question is, you're saying people need the resource, they need the money. But then the question at the back of that is, if they have gotten it, then what next, right? Where are they going to put it? Where are they going to invest it? Then secondly, how sustainable is that mechanism? Because we need to build an institution or mechanisms that are sustainable in a kind of a nature. You asked my colleague earlier about something to do with AI. Is it a threat to the work, the employment question? I think before we even deliberate, and I'll speak to that, then I'll speak to the governance element, and maybe I'll conclude with that. I think before we even speak to data and AI, the first question that I think for me rotates around, what's our insurance? If you look at the United States, it's building a power in about 4 things, right? They're building in space. They have gone to the space. They're building on water. They are building, I forget the other two, but if you look at the four, so they are doing space, water, army on land, you know, it's a superpower in about 4 folds. It's an insurance. Any kind of emerging economy will have to go to them if they want to go to tap into the space. They have that. So the first thing, we're using X, as my colleague said. Who is protecting this data? We as Ugandans, as young people who are emerging, creating these innovations, Kidega, the question you put to me, in employment, as I'm creating this innovation to maybe tool young farmers, how can we ensure that that cloud protection is actually there? Who's protecting this? Because at the end of the day, we're in a fourth industrial revolution. Exactly. And in the next emerging technologies, or, you know, the next revolution, who knows if everything we're feeding in there, it's going to be used by people who are not even here. We've been feeding it into them. It's a deep question that we need to ask ourselves in terms of that before we even start saying the phone is going to take away the ability of a lawyer or a student who is just from university to innovate. You know, who is protecting that? I think that's the first thing as Ugandans. And I don't know if ministry is thinking about something like that, because we need to have what we would call homegrown solutions, you know, and that speaks to some of these innovations that have been brought up to alleviate. So 3 things in terms of governance. I think in terms of governance, it's very important that every year or quarterly, we take a minute and pause, right? And review some of these initiatives. If something like the Youth Livelihood Fund has told us, or in research demonstrated that it's not working, it's a failed initiative, it's well as also very good to say, let's put a stop to this, right? Or, because if we are saying, I'll just give you an example, again on the governance, maybe I wrap up in the issuance of money. A person in Uganda, a student who has grown up here or whatever, and is able to access this money with a lot of ease, right? Might relate and say the program is working because there's been an element of easiness of accessing these funds, or they know, you know. But a student in Karamoja, you know, they might not easily relate. Why? Because the element of that is that it's not easily, in my own consideration, I think it's not easily for them to relate, because they've either struggled or whatever to get to the access of these funds to alleviate them. So that's why you're going to have issues of saying that the guys from the students who are either across the country are going to feel they have been left out. Why? Because the program, they're going to say, no, the only people in Central Region or something can easily access the funds. Why? Because maybe they've studied there or whatever. But a student in you know, up the country might not be able to relate with a policy like that, because they have not easily had access. So in terms of governance, the governance question, I think the government needs to, first of all, every quarterly or yearly, I don't know how the initiative can be, to review these initiatives, you know, and then to build mechanisms and systems that are homegrown. And in that, I gave you an example of where we could start by, even if we're skilling the youth, we could start by ensuring that we have hubs that are protecting these innovations. Because year in and out, you know, innovations are coming. Who is protecting? You could speak about something about sustainability. You know, the youth startups are happening. You've handed to me 1 million. I think the biggest question is, are you tooling me to understand that if I invested this money like this, then it would turn out like this? I think that's the other, you know, hub in terms of governance. We need to prioritize more in terms of that, in terms of tooling. And then finally, in terms of its sustainability, we need to do reviews, you know, because testimonials are important. And I think that's what speaks to the youth. If a youth is going to get into agriculture and you tell them that, oh, I started with 1 million and I have made it better. If they see that Kidega has made it, and by their testimony, then I will have to, I'll pick interest in. So I think government needs to do reviews. We need to, you know, tool our people who we've empowered to be able to use the resources that we've given them, not only just for the moment, but for even tons of spans of time to come.
Yeah, fair enough. And, you know, fantastic submission. What I pick out are basically 2 things. One is, just to paraphrase the words of JF Kennedy, that at times before you ask what the country has done for you, what have you done
for the country?
What can you do for the country? I think the point that I depart with you is that where young people want the government to, on top of giving them this money, to go ahead and, tell them how to use the money. I don't know if the renowned businessmen, like maybe, I don't know, in Uganda here domestically, like Wavamuno, I don't know if at the time there was some sort of a business school or something. I think they simply knew better. They said, there is this opportunity, I have this money, I want to use it in whatever way to grow this money. Otherwise, if you want the government to give us this soft credit, go ahead to tell us how to invest it. I think we could be asking for too much. I think there comes a point in time when we must take responsibility and say, okay, there are things that the government can do, there are things that I must do for myself.
Yeah.
Otherwise, then, but the point I agree with you is that the ecosystem must continue. Because it isn't enough to give me money and then not create for me the market for my produce. So that is where government can come in to like sort of complete that ecosystem.
Yeah.
But somewhere in between that system, you must take personal initiative.
Yeah, and I think just to something that you've just touched that I find very pragmatic of what you're saying, that what are we doing as a youth or any person who wants to venture in this? I think that is driven by the fundamentally, firstly, the platform that the government is creating. I think every youth out there, or a young person, or whatever stage they are doing something, the little they can. There are people who are yearning for an internship placement. Why? Because they've been told that if you don't intern, you might not get the skill, right? And there are people who have, I'll give you probably an example. There are people who have taken up different courses and doing totally something different. In their, I've been to a media house where you meet a person who says, I probably went to law school, or I went to I did medicine, and I'm now in an IT space. Why? Because when they came in and maybe they asked them, can you do a voicing, something like that, and they took up the initiative, and the next thing they knew that maybe I'm somewhere here and I've gotten a placement. So I think the young people, yes, they are fundamentally, what are they doing about themselves? Firstly, they have said, let's indulge in this education system. I had my friends criticize the education system. They're saying, let's go in, study these things, right? I think they have already availed themselves. I think then after that is the platform to ensure that even when somebody has been given, and that's the example I gave you, that a person from the central region can easily relate because they made a phone call to a person or something like that, and they easily got that placement. But somebody who has come from up country might not relate with the same, because the government is actually not giving them that impetus. Yeah. Because they seem alienated, away from this. So what are we doing about ourselves? I think maybe as advice, as you put it, one is take initiatives, involve yourself. If you had somebody say, are you interested in tech? Read about it, write an article or something. And that way, I think the government can be able to identify. I would equate it that to politicians, because you can only become the MP or whatever by saying, you know what, guys, I will get involved in this in the election. So if you hear of a placement, right, do your luck. If you hear that they're going to give away parish development model money, please jump in. And then, but after that you've picked, I think the question there is, after you've gotten access to that funds, how do you use it? Absolutely.
Fair enough. Timothy, let me come to you, because I think in this second round I'd skipped you. And the question still that I put to him is, because I think that the biggest duty bearer in whatever situation it is a government. Because government enjoys monopoly over so many things. Monopoly over violence, monopoly over so many things. All right? So just from the context of, because if you look at our legal regime, it provides for economic rights to, if you look at our land tenure system, it is meant to encourage access to factors of production like land. So and all the legal frameworks, if you to look at them critically, they are meant to encourage an economy that works. But the basic structure doctrine, that if some element of this very beautiful governance framework is broken down, the other nitty-gritties are just not going to work. That if you have a country where okay, I don't want to be the one to say this, but you look at our political system, all right? Vis-a-vis, you look at Kenya. Someone comes, knows that I have my 10 years here. I must leave a legacy. Because you know that 10 years is all you have.
Yes.
I want to put up this railway, and that's what I'll be remembered for. You're anxious to leave something behind. There's that urge to be like, I must be remembered. I must do something. Here, there is that comfortability. Someone can be in power for perpetual. It is as long as they... So do you think that the governance, the political governance system,
Yes.
once we resolve it, and I am not saying it is unresolved, but once we maybe change the way it looks like, do you think it could open floodgates for a very big future? Because, and for context, you could compare us with Kenya.
Yes.
How quick Kenya has moved, and yet we are almost at the same level. But today, if you go to Nairobi, yeah, it's a different city.
Exactly.
All right, because Uhuru came, did what he could. Ruto is here, he knows he has 10 years. So the political question, does it have is it in any way related to the unemployment and whatever we are discussing?
Yes, I would say that it is to an extent related to what we are discussing. But first of all, what I would like to note is that, as I've earlier said, Uganda has got very good laws because everything is there. The laws, the parliament makes laws, and the implementers are there. But the problem is people make these laws and then they sit back. They think that these laws are going to implement themselves, you know? Now, for example, when you look at the structure of the Electoral Commission of Uganda, you know, the way it speaks to what an election, what a fair election would look like, you know, an election that is not characterized with violence, vote rigging, and everything. But when you go back to the ground, look at what is happening, you know, the people in office, most of them, okay, I would say the people in power, are the same people that are working so hard to make sure that these laws are broken, you know. So, for example, I would give an example in this recent election that we've just left. I'm confident enough to say that a lot of people are now into offices that they were not elected in, like to go to offices. Some of them used a lot of very many ways to get to where they are, you know, because I was on ground. At least I could tell. I was on various polling stations and everything where I come from. I saw what was happening, you know. Yeah. So when you compare Uganda's political system to the one of Kenya, of course, it would be good because we're in the same region, and these countries are ranked as, you know, being on the same level.
Contemporaries.
Yes, contemporaries. For example, in the judiciary, look at how independent the judicial system of Kenya is and compared to ours. I wouldn't say that it's not fully fully independent, but there's some aspects that come in and that would question the independence of our judicial system. Some decisions here in our country are influenced by people in top offices, which is not the same case in Kenya. Yeah, you would say that a judge in Kenya would come out and defend his or her point, would make a decision giving reasons. You know, the reasons are made not because of the political biasness of what is taking place in the country, but according to the reasoning and to equity and fairness of the people, because courts are there to serve the people, you know. Now, for example, if such things are happening, now what would happen to things like the loans that government is supposed to give to the people? You know, that takes us back to what we've been discussing, the point of discrimination and everything. You know, there are laws that are supposed to protect people. That I agree. You know, the parliament makes laws. People make good laws in Uganda, but the implementation of these laws has become a problem. In that the people that are supposed to keep the laws, let's say the courts, some of them are just reluctant. You know, for me, I would expect if a person has come up with a law, they should also come up with good policies and mechanisms that would put this law into operation, you know? Yeah, so if you come out and say that you're going to support the youths or the people to give them loans, start up businesses, and then when people apply, it's also very difficult for someone to go through, you know? At least you would come up and say, is such and such a number has applied, but to such and such reasons, we are going to facilitate only a certain number of people. But things are done and no one accounts to anything that is done, or no one gives reasons to what is happening. For example, during lockdown, the COVID relief fund, a lot happened, you know. LC1 chairpersons made lists of people that are supposed to get that relief fund. The people that the government termed to be the impoverished. But in some areas, well-off families are the ones that received that money. Because I could relate with some people from the families that we would call that are good, and then they will tell you the reality that for us, we received the money. And then you look at someone who is in the slum, who has been maybe operating a kiosk. You know, someone has been operating a kiosk, and that has been their livelihood. And
Just what is happening in downtown.
Yes. So it goes back to what I've been saying, that the laws are there. Our legal regime is very, very good, you know, because at least we've catered for most of the things. Not everything, but most of the things. We have laws that cater for the youths, for the women, for everything, you know, but the implementation of these laws, yes, that's where emphasis needs to be put.
Okay. We are trying to move towards the tail end of this conversation. Now, so Hafasha, so still on this aspect, we are trying to be as pragmatic as possible. I've ever since become a fan of Lee Kuan Yew, the founding father of Singapore, and you know it is a fairy tale story, you know, from where he picked up the country to where he left it. All right. I don't know what economic approach was used in Singapore. Maybe I haven't addressed my mind to that. But is the approach that our government is using here, can it work? The idea of, okay, there is Myoga here, there is Bonaba Gagawale here, there is Youth Livelihood Program here. Because we agree on this table that the issue of access to credit must be resolved. But are we resolving it the right way? Do we need to maybe review our micro and macroeconomic policies, whereby the central bank is able to maybe regulate in some way so that somehow these commercial banks don't lend money at 24%, but lend at a lower rate? All right? I don't know if we are doing it right. Because, like you said, we have had Ntandikwa, we have had all these things, but have the poverty levels, in fact, shrinked? I don't know. This idea of go get money here, some people see it as a political bonanza. The urge to repay back is not there.
Most of them come towards elections.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to these districts, the district youth officers will tell you that the youth get this money, and before you know it, they're drinking alcohol,
married,
they're
second
getting
wives.
married. So, like he asked, is it sustainable? For how long shall we be giving people?
You need a contribution on that.
Your perspective, yes.
Number one, you asked about what Singapore might have gone through to be at a state which it has at the moment. Whereas, as of now, we have it among the countries in the whole world that are doing well economically, including Hong Kong, including economies of France. Okay? And when you look at our country here, they give us the fish instead of teaching us how to fish. So if you give me, when you look at that 100 million per parish, and the youth are allocated 30, then the group 30, then the group 30, remaining is, I think, is around 10, isn't it? So at the end of the day, when I get this money, I've not been told to how to work for this money. And at the end of the day, that's why when these people get the money, and maybe it is at the family level, the best way, there is no money, I have to pay school fees for my child to go to school. But at the end of the day, the government has not told to me how to work for this money. Look at business graduates from Makerere University Business School at Chambogo and the other tertiary institutions that are teaching business studies to this generation. You realize that we have multi companies in Uganda, like talk of MTN, talk of Airtel. If you are talking about sales and the other things related to business, why can't we have some of these people go to Airtel and begin sales from there? Right away at a time when they feel they are much passionate about that. We just lament about that, but we need to look and move on from the book of, some of you read the Bible. Maybe I would encourage us to move from the book of Lamentations and we go to the book of Acts, because it is also there, such that if the model was drafted very well by the drafters and designers, what is the problem? Is the problem implementation? So if the problem is implementation, what then can we do in the aftermath of that? Today, I cannot say that the PDM is a failed program. Because when you go back to your village in Guru, when you go back to your village in Kasese or Bundibujo, where each of us comes from, my friend, I do not know how many people were able to benefit from the same model. Why? Because perhaps, you see, PDM has pillars. And in the pillars, there is the first pillar, number 2, number 3, there are 7. But an issue to do with mindset was put in number 5. So how will you get the money, and then you spend it, then after spending it, you're telling me come and have a mindset. So you realize that there was also a problem in drafting what? The whole model. That you cannot have mindset at the end of the day, when you are supposed to begin it at the beginning of the day. So the problem of some of these government programs and other projects that come within, they do not help us to creatively think on how we should be able to address the challenges and problems we are facing. Look at the early marriages we are facing in Uganda today. Between the ages of, I think, 13, 14, you saw what was happening to a secondary teacher. You saw what was happening in Chambogo. You know, these are things each of us has at least been aware of. So to cut the long story short, paperwork has been very sweet. Very, extremely, very wonderful. But the implementation, which has also not just begun. I was sharing with a friend, I think early in the morning, and I told him, you man, if you see there is corruption, and corruption is hindering the country's economic growth, it has not just begun. Even when we are cognizant that by 2002, it was a wonderful country. So things started changing. So if it was Kidega and Kidega was a general, and perhaps there was somebody to join the army, Kidega would recruit his family member. So at the end of the day, the other families do not what? Do not benefit. So the other thing that is hindering whatever we would want to see as a country is that vice, corruption. And why is it tied? From our friends who are already in higher position, like a friend put it forward already. So the question is, if this is happening, if this money is released, where does this money pass? May have never accessed the PDM money. Maybe you guys have. Maybe you could testify to the public that you have already received the money. So the public knowledge is, where does this money go? So we have our leaders, in fact, maybe if it is about mindset, who cannot transformatively lead our people. They are doing much more of politicking than in fact leading the people.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And just to put that into perspective, is that the same leaders we look forward for a mindset change are the same leaders who are depriving the people of Karamoja of iron sheets. I think that's how bad the situation is. Colleagues, our time is fast spent. We need to be out of here in the next 5 minutes. So I'll give you all just 1 minute to give us your parting shots. But Peter, because he joined us late, I'll give him 2 minutes. The rest of us, you'll have strictly 1 minute. So Peter, I'll begin with you. Your final shots on the show regarding unemployment. Unfortunately, we couldn't talk about Tarehe Sita because of time. But yes, let's just keep it on unemployment. So Peter, you have 2 minutes as I come towards Hafashimana.
Yeah, thank you, Kidega. I think for me the biggest takeaway is if we were to do a comparative analysis, we are to do benchmarks, fundamentally what are we doing back at home to ensure that everything we are benchmarking with, we are comparing with, is actually something that the citizens need? I think that's the first question, because if we're going to solve this problem of unemployment in one twofold, one where if a solution we're providing is just not a, you know, when you have a headache and they just give you, and a headache is just a symptom of something grave. It could be a cancer or something, or a migraine. So when they give you a token, you know, you've solved the hunger. You know, if you go and pick the 1 million, you're able to, as Kidega has been mentioning, you're able to solve the hunger. But you're not solving a question of something as people we are comparing with the US and who are now dealing with the problem. Okay, it's not a problem, it's a good one. Generational wealth. You know, how are we going to build that? Because as a nation, we need to be able to empower citizens to be able to equip. Earlier when I came, people were quoting examples of rich, renowned businessmen whose businesses are now failing. Why are we not propelling those businesses to generational wealth? And how can we do that? And that's why I say that going back is to be able to groom and build solutions that are homegrown, that are tailored for. We shouldn't be talking about that we need jobs. No, we should be talking about the quality of the job. You know, that even when somebody is employed, they're employed in a field probably they studied, they are meeting a certain level of money that they think they should be able to get, and they're able to sustain their lives. Not just, you're not working to survive,
Just getting by,
but to thrive. And I think that's the conversation we need to project as a country, that you've compared us to Kenya. If you look at them, they are doing way better. Why? Because they have actually understood that they're not in work just for a day. They're in work to ensure the legacy that you talked about. And that's the same thing. So if we have sectors here, if we've noticed the youth can be in agriculture, can be in tech, invest. But for posterity, not just for minutes, not just for days, yeah, but also not just to survive. The feeding can go on. You know, somebody is working for rent, and then I'm able to ask them, okay, can we talk about where do you see yourself in creating an institution that can, you know, outlive your time? They can't speak to that. We need to be able to give people that confidence. So I think let's review these initiatives. If they're not working, it's very okay. If today you can have a perspective about something, it's very okay to throw it out of the window, and tomorrow have a fresh one, and then create it. Yeah, if it works for the people, that if it's very built for the people and it's creating a sustainable mechanism, adopt it. What is failing, drop it. What's working, build it.
Fantastic. Timothy.
Yes. Me, I would urge the youths and most of the people that have not yet found employment, and those that are in schools that are planning to or expecting to come out anytime, is that would look at trying to change the mindset or our mindset. You know, for example, we should stay away from this thinking that, of course, when I go to school, I'll come out and get a better job. You know, let us have this thinking that when I come out, what's next? Let us not think about only white collar jobs. There are a lot of things that we can start with. You know, I've seen a lot of people that who have at least tried to change their mindset, and in that course of line, they you find that they've started up something. Yeah. So in the long run, the earning, and at the same time, they're still waiting on what they were trained to be. You know. Yeah. So that's all I can say in this bit.
Amazing, very fantastic. Yes, Edson.
Thank you. To the government, for money to be released into the economy, that money is supposed to work and not to be eaten. That money is supposed to be used. So the government should revise some of these schemes and how they have been releasing out money. Like my colleagues have pointed out, 1 million shillings to a family can't change the family. It is just going to be eaten. So money should be given to those who are already doing something. If there's a young man who has begun maybe making crafts in town, make it possible for him to access money so that he can build. Why is it so easy for me to access a brand or maybe a t-shirt made in the UK or maybe in France, and so hard for me to get a belt made downtown Kampala, something like that? So money should be given to those who are already doing something, and those who know how to use the money those who have showed that they can be able to use the money so that they can use it to build the economy and maybe create a few jobs here and there in the community. And then to the young people in our institutions and those getting out and those looking at employment, volunteering is one of the ways of getting there. Don't wait to get a job. Build your craft as you fly it. Volunteer with a company. If you have a degree, go to a company and ask to volunteer with them. Before you know it, you're recruited, or you have the experience that is needed than just sitting and waiting and lamenting and all that. And then for parents and young people, technical and vocational education is still a very good thing to go so that we can have the skills, maybe carpentry, welding, and hands-on things, maybe computing and practicals. We should go more into that. Parents, maybe now that you see results are going to be out, maybe we should have some of these young people going to technical training institutions and do national higher diplomas in maybe practical things, are not just going to get the theory that is in the universities and all that. And to the training institutions, curricula should be revised to meet the current trends in the job market. And most importantly, a founder mindset is very, very important among our young people. We should be able to create things, start things, build things, not just waiting to be taken on board by those who have created. We should create, and maybe we can be helped as we are creating, building, and starting things that can be able to help. Start a business, try things here and there. It can be a good thing in as much as getting a job and getting out of the unemployment sector is concerned.
Wow, fantastic. Hafashimana.
Asante bwana, Comrade Kidega. Number one, at the Youth Training Forum, we believe in creating communities whereby every youth can thrive. And from the words of Martin Luther King, who is the founding father of the freedom and the rights of the blacks in America, but also worldwide over, he had this to say that if you can't fly, then do running. Run. If you can't run, walk. You walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But at the end of the day, you have to keep moving. The notion of this discussion has to compel the government to change the narrative. And from the genesis of the discussion, we looked at the colonial days that the system we are based or that we are using was introduced by a government which is not Uganda, though the Ministry of Education and Uganda generally has tried to address the concern by revising and reviewing some of the educational policies in this country. And moving further forward, it is factual that even when university students finish and wait for graduation, waiting for more than a month, a year, that you want to graduate, then beyond that you have to wait for 3 months to get your document, your testimony or something, and you take more than 3 months. I think it is not wise, especially in the current government that we have. That means the university management, now that they have those veto powers to ensure that at least at the end of the day, if you are entering university, each of you must have a laptop, you must have your personal computers, other than this, so that maybe at the end of the day, we can shift from a student, you move from a hostel, then you go to a lecture room to attend a lesson. Even when I could attend this lesson when I'm at home. Beyond that, I think we can also save time but also resources. But that should be incumbent upon university to say, no, in your functional fees, let us have this money, and this money is allocated for a PC, not being something like maybe you are doing that at a goodwill or beyond that. So, to conclude the discussion, Comrade Kidega,
and to making education more expensive, but
it is not more expensive. In fact, cutting costs other than going and pay hostel fees and a lot of things you cut.
Okay.
Yeah.
In a second. All right, guys, thank you. Peter, Timothy, Edison, and Hafashimana, thank you very much for your time. Of course, Rashid and the team, thank you for ensuring that our viewers get this show right at 2 p.m. To the viewers, it's always a pleasure to have you. My last words are the words of Henry Barlow in his article Building the Nation, where he narrates two different individuals, one a permanent secretary, the other a driver of the same, two of whom get home in the evening with the belief and hope that they've made a contribution towards building a nation. One from a point of sacrifice, the other from a point of luxury. Well, that is the actual reality of our country, but the duty is upon us to make it a better place because it's our only home. We don't have any other. Until next week, same time, same place, have a lovely Wednesday. Bye-bye.